If you are trying to win your NFL Survivor Pool here in 2025, you've come to the right place. This is the fastest growing show of its kind on YouTube. I'm here to help guide you all the way to the finish line and get you that big payday. My name is Statsational. I am here for the Sharp app, and the show is called Scratching and Surviving, where we analyze the survivor pools in a way that's a little bit different than maybe you've seen on some other shows. I'm not going to just tell you who I think is going to win because, quite frankly, none of us really know who will win these games. All we can do is look at it from an analytical standpoint. Let's look at the math. Let's look at the numbers. Let's play some game theory. And if we could just shift the edge slightly in our favor over time, we will be profitable. So if you have not been with us before, welcome. Thank you. Hit the subscribe, like the video if you like it. Don't do it now. Do it after if you like the content. And for those of you who have been subscribing and have liked these videos, and there are a ton of you, it's amazing because I get the analytics, of course, from YouTube. And we went from 70% of you who were not subscribed watching these videos, and we're down to 58% of you. Still a lot of you are watching and not subscribing, but that is a huge jump. So I really appreciate it. It helps us out tremendously. All right, let's talk about week quickly. We lost about 15 to 20% of entries in week 3. Green Bay, just an unbelievable loss there to Cleveland. Looked like they had that game in hand. I'm sure knocked a few of your entries out, a few of you out there watching. Most people did not take Cleveland like as a single entry. I'm sorry, Green Bay was not necessarily a pick that people threw out there with their one entry. But if you have multiple entries, like I do in one of my pools, in both of my pools, I've got 30 entries in one pool, and then in the big DraftKings $1,000 entry pool, I've got 10 entries there. I did have one Green Bay, so that knocked me out. The other big one that knocked some people out was Atlanta. I did not have any Atlanta in my DraftKings pool. Some of you did. Now, depending on the size of your pool, and for those who are new, that's really what we look at. Different types of pools, different rules in pools are going to dictate the direction that you go. So that's really what I like to do with this show is I don't want to tell you who to pick because, again, I don't know who's going to win. I want to give you guys the tools to make those decisions yourself. And quite frankly, when you win it all, it feels a whole lot better that you made these calls on your own. And I've had a lot of you win pools throughout the last few years of doing this show, and I'm hoping to get a whole bunch more this year. Maybe it's going to be you. All right, so we lose some entries on Atlanta. If you look at like the big pool, if you're not familiar, Circa is like the biggest survivor pool out there, the most famous one. I've been in that pool in the past. Did not get in that one this year. And then this year they added a $100,000 entry pool called the Grandissimo or Grandissimo. And that pool has 68 entries that started $6.8 million. And that would be considered to me a small pool, right? And the players in that pool, you'll see how the picks differ. If you go to Survivor Atlas, and I mentioned this in a previous episode, but Survivor Atlas, I met the gentleman who started that website. He is a past Circa Survivor winner, and I met him at a DraftKings PGA event live final for DraftKings. I play DFS professionally, so I go to a lot of these live finals, and he started this website. It's an excellent site if you are in those pools, if you're in Circa, Survivor, or Grandissimo. But if you take a look at that website, you'll see that the picks will be different in the Grandissimo as opposed to Circa, because Circa, 18,000 entries that they got in that pool this year. And because of that, of course, you're going to play a different strategy. This is what I advocate. And you've got a lot of sharp people in both of those pools, and they understand this, right? They understand that in the smaller pool, we're going to try and stay a little bit more chalky for a couple of reasons. One, we don't think the pool's going to make it the full 18 weeks. Now, in Circa, they have different rules. They've got Thanksgiving, you need to pick a game, and Christmas, you need to pick a game, and we'll discuss that as well. But in your pool, more than likely, you've got to go 18 individual weeks. Thanksgiving will be lumped in with the weekend games, as will Christmas will be lumped in with those Sunday, Monday night games as well. So you've got 18 weeks. And if you've only got 50 to 100 people in your pool, there's a really good chance that you are not going to get the full 18 weeks. You also our goal here is obviously to win, but our goal is to get to a point where we can build enough equity where we could start hedging our bets. And if we're in Circa or the Grandissimo, there's a website called Survivor Sweats that's really good. It's a secondary market website where you can then sell your equity. You could sell 10% of your entry. You could sell your entire entry based on how much equity you have on that entry. So we're going to be getting into more and more of that as the weeks go on. But just want to give you a little bit of background for those of you who are new to this channel and to this particular show. So we've got, roughly 15 to 20% knocked out last week, the biggest week that we've had of knockouts. We still haven't had that one massive upset that's really knocked out a huge chunk. We haven't had that 40% of entries knocked out, which typically does happen, not every week, of course, but we will have weeks like that. Perhaps it's this week, although this week we've got some really huge favorites. And then week 5 looks like it's going to be a very, very hairy week. So let's kind of dive into it right now. Let's jump on to my spreadsheet. And again, for those of you new, I've got a spreadsheet here that it's not the end all be all, but it does give us an idea of what we should be looking at. And I was messing with this before, so let's reset it back to 0%. If you're new, very quickly, I've got the money lines on these games. How do I come up with the money line? I go to the Sharp app and I use Pinnacle as the determinant, because Pinnacle is one of the sharpest books out there. I'll take the midpoint of both sides. I'll take the underdog and I'll take the favorite on the money line. I take the midpoint, and that's going to give us a fairly accurate number as far as what the win probability is. And now some of you may say, well, the win probability of Green Bay was 70 whatever percent it was last week, and they lost. That's right, because 25% of the time, 30% of the time, that team is going to lose. And if you do this over the course of time, there's a book called Wisdom of the Crowds. If you've not read that book, fascinating. It's a really a good read. I'm forgetting the author's name at this at this moment, but look up the book Wisdom of the Crowds, and in that book you'll see that one of the famous stories is there was an ox at a fair, let's say the turn of the prior century, 1800s, early 1900s. There's a fair, and you had to guess the weight of the ox. If you guessed the weight, you got to win that ox. And if they had a few hundred people submit their number as far as what they thought the weight of that ox was, nobody actually hit the number on the head. But when they averaged out all of the picks, you found that average was closer than almost all of the individual guesses on what the weight was. And we've seen this a million times. You've seen the jar of marbles, and you've got to guess how many marbles or jelly beans or anything like that are in there. And the reason is we're all going to have our own strategies as far as what we think that number of marbles are, or jelly beans, or what the weight is. And we're all going, some of us are just going to look and take a guess. Some of us are going to be more analytical. We're going to try to measure we're going to look at that ox and say, well, he's X amount of feet wide, and he's wide feet tall, and we'll come up with a theory there. Everyone's going to have their own way of doing it. And because there's so many different ways that people are coming up with how they come up with that answer, the average tends to be a lot closer to what the actual is. And this happens in sports betting as well, especially in the NFL. The reason being because it's a highly liquid market. It's like the stock market. The reason the stock market is tough to beat the averages, the reason it's tough to beat like the S&P over time, and by the way, if you are invested in a mutual fund, or you are one of the rare people who may be invested in a hedge fund, they will over time not outperform the S&P. It's very, very difficult. In the short term, you may have a 5-year run where you do outperform the S&P, but if you have some sort of a fund, especially, if whatever the mutual fund may be, it's going to be extremely difficult, because the S&P is made up of of some of the most traded stocks right in the world, and it's going to be really difficult for the individual to be able to outpick that group think and the wisdom of the crowd. So that happens here in sports betting as well. And while, yes, the team that is a 91% favorite, 92% favorite, which is Buffalo this week, may not win the game this week, But if they play this game 1,000 times, they're going to win about 900 to 920 of those times. Same thing with flipping a coin. If we flip the coin, we expect heads and tails to come out 50% of the time. But in a 10 flip sample, we easily may get 10 heads in a row. You see this in roulette when you walk by the roulette table and you see 10 reds in a row and you're like, well, black is due. Well, it's really not, because at any one time during the run, we may get a run of 10, 15, 20 in a row of the black or red. All right, so let's look at this week, and I've got my spreadsheet up here for those who are new to it. You got the money lines. We've got the win probabilities based on those money lines. Simple calculation. Look up implied probabilities. I've got videos here on how to do that as well if you look on the channel. Future value, FV. This I'm getting off of Survivor Atlas, and all it really is we're adding up what we think the future lines will be for each of these teams. The higher the negative, or the lower the negative, I should say, the lower the number, the more future value that team has. So obviously Buffalo is going to be a team with a lot of future value. You see Baltimore here, a lot of future value for Baltimore as well. And the teams with the higher the number, much less future value. Why is that important to us? It's important because if we're in a small pool, we don't necessarily care as much about future value because we're not worried about this pool going 18 weeks. We want to build equity as quickly as we possibly can. We're going to take what we perceive to be the best teams early without backing ourselves into a corner, and we're going to get into that with this week, where we don't necessarily have as good a pick. So we want to try to pick as optimally as we possibly can. To do that in a large pool and pick optimally for 18 weeks is much more difficult. We don't know what the injury situation is going to be. We don't know if we're going to get a Joe Burrow type of injury, right? If Lamar Jackson gets hurt this week and is out for the rest of the season, that's going to drastically change how our picks are going to go, right, for the rest of the year. So we can't go, I don't like to look too far out into the future. Now, with this week, Buffalo, 91%, 92% favorite. They're being picked at 25%. This is coming off a Survivor Grid. I'm going to show you guys that in a bit. And then this is just my formulas here for if I was not weighting future value at all. I've got a 0 future value weight. I put in 100 entries just because it shows it. It'll be the equivalent of showing it as a percentage. So maybe you'd want in a small pool, if you had 2 entries, 60% of your entries on Buffalo and 40% on Detroit, because those are the 2 biggest favorites. Now, if you're in a small pool, it's unlikely you're going to have a lot of entries, but maybe you have 2 and you would say, you know what, I'll take 1 Buffalo, 1 Detroit this week and move on. But we'll look deeper if that is a good idea or not. And then I've got, if you're going to play 3 teams, 4 teams, 5 teams, 6 teams, you're probably not going to play much more than that as we go. Threshold is going to be a much more important column as the weeks go on, because in threshold here, we're going to be looking at the potential of maybe fading the best team. If this was late in the season and you had a chance to take Buffalo, you would only fade them if you could get another team over 90%, 89%, 90% or better, right? So what this is telling you is at the end of the year, if this was week 16, we were down to just 3 or 4 people in your pool, and you had the option of taking Buffalo, and you expected that of the 4 people left in your pool, only 1 was going to take Buffalo, 25%. You would be hard pressed not to take Buffalo in this situation, but it's going to be a little early for this threshold column for you guys. All right, so let's take a look at Survivor Grid and see. Now we got Buffalo, we've got Detroit. They're the 2 massive favorites. Do we want to get on them? Is getting on one of these teams going to hurt us maybe in future weeks? And by future weeks, I really want to just look at weeks that are upcoming, because again, I don't know if Josh Allen is going to make it the entire season. We just don't know, right? So he could get hurt this week, and then that throws a monkey wrench in all of our plans. So let's take a look at what we've got here for this week. You've got Buffalo, obviously the biggest favorite. They're getting 25% of the pick percentage according to Survivor Grid. It's going to be different in your pool. Slightly higher pick percentage is Detroit. Now, why is that? Well, a lot of people picked Buffalo last week. They were a massive favorite. We went over this last week. We said, look, you've got to look at week 4 and week 5 for Buffalo, because they're going to be a big favorite in each of these weeks. And now this week, 16.5-point favorite. They might be the largest favorite we see all year. So do you want to take Buffalo this week? Do we need them again in the near future? Well, we might need them next week. because they're going to be a 10-point favorite here next week. You may have taken Baltimore and Arizona. These are popular picks. If you've taken Baltimore and Arizona already, then perhaps you're going to want to save Buffalo for next week. Now, you also have Detroit, which is a big pick this week. Maybe you want them at Cincinnati next week. Now, you have to make that determination. What is a better path here? Is the better path to take Buffalo this week and Detroit next week, assuming you've taken Baltimore and Arizona, or is it to take Detroit this week and then Buffalo next week? Now, if we do the math and we do the numbers on this, the way to figure this out, at least the next 2 weeks, which is the more optimal, and we're taking, it's a slight guess here. Is Detroit going to be a 7.5-point favorite? Yeah, probably in that ballpark. Be careful on Survivor Grid. When we go too far out, these numbers are not as accurate because they're looking at what the number would have been maybe a week or so ago. It has updated for this week because this Minnesota game at Cleveland, they were showing this as like a 7-point spread not that long ago. It is now 4.5, which is about where the market is on this game. So just be careful, and you got to kind of use your own judgment here on these future lines. But this looks about right. Buffalo should be about a 10-point favorite next week. They're at home. Baltimore will be a pretty big favorite here against Houston. Arizona, again, will be a big favorite with Tennessee. I don't know if 8 points will be accurate here. I think they may be a little bit less than that. And you've got to take into account and consideration what happens this week also affects the lines for next week. So if we can assume that a 7.5-point favorite, in Cincinnati will be Detroit at Cincinnati, and Buffalo, as we already know, is 16.5-point favorite. So let's just round the numbers for ease here. Okay, let's look at this week. We've got about a 90% chance that Buffalo wins their game. What is the probability that if I took Buffalo this week and I took Detroit next week, what's their probability Detroit next week? Well, you can go really, it's going to be, here you go. Denver at Cincinnati is a 7-point spread. That's about 76%. So let's just call this Cincinnati game, Detroit has about a 75% chance to win. Buffalo has a 90% chance to win. All you're going to do is multiply those two percentages. So 90% times 75%. Now, I promise you I could do this in my head, but I'm going to use the calculator because inevitably I will screw this up while I'm doing the show. 67.5% is 90% multiplied by 75%. That's the probability that you win both of those games. So you've got a 67.5% chance to advance to week 6 if that's the route you take. What if we take Detroit this week, who's got an 80% chance to win, and then we take Buffalo next week, and at a 10-point favorite, let's figure out 10 points is going to be about an 80. Well, you can see it here. Detroit is 9.5-point favorites. They're close to an 80%. So let's just call it an 80% chance to win. And we've got two 80% chances to win. So 0.8 times 0.8 gets us 0.64. So we've got a slightly less chance of winning both of these games if we go the route of taking Detroit now and then Buffalo next week. All right. That's if you feel confident here that this line will be about 7.5. I'm going to say it's fairly negligible, but I want you guys to make that determination. And that's how you figure it. It's much easier to do these, of course, when we're only looking 1 or 2 weeks out. So you make that determination for yourself, but it's fairly negligible on which side is, which route is the best route to go. Now, do we want to save either one of these teams in a small pool? Again, I don't want to save these teams to go all that, deep in the pool because we just don't know what's going to happen. Let's flip back now to my sheet. Let's look at a pool where we're going to look at a little bit more future value. All right. So looking at, we'll bring the sheet up. Looking at the sheet, I'm going to switch this now to a 50% future value. And now Houston pops up as an option. Why? Because they have very little future value, still a pretty high probability to win, 77% chance here that they win this game. I like this pick quite a bit in smaller or larger size pools for this reason. They're being picked at about a 10% clip right now. So we do get a little bit of leverage. A lot of people obviously are going to take that Buffalo Detroit pick. If you're in a larger pool, I think Houston becomes a real interesting option. Now, if you're in a pool, we've talked about this before, where you have a knockout, where you're allowed to lose multiple times, at least once before you are eliminated, or you have a rebuy, Houston is an excellent pick. You want to save Buffalo, you want to save Detroit, you want to save the good teams in those type of pools. You want to be able to get away with picking the worst possible teams you can in those formats, right? Until you are then forced to have to take the good teams, which is when you don't have any more, there's no more safety net. You don't have another rebuy, you don't have another out, and then you could start taking the good teams. So we want to eliminate these bad teams as early as we possibly can, and then that's going to increase the equity we have in our entry because we're going to have so many good, strong teams left to take. So we see Houston becomes an option here if we are in a moderately sized pool. I get asked this all the time. It's really, you have to use your judgment. For me, once I get to 100 plus, I'm looking at that as a moderate type of pool. Once I get to like that 1,000 number, it becomes a much larger pool, and that's when I look at 100% weight. And let's look at what that looks like here. And if I weight this at 100%, now New England pops and Houston. Now, I still like Houston for the same reasons in much larger pools. I think it's an excellent play. In Circa, great play here. Circa, you guys are looking, of course, at the future. Buffalo does not play, by the way, any holiday games, which is pretty amazing to me that they wouldn't have Buffalo as a primetime holiday game, but they're not. Detroit, of course, always plays on Thanksgiving, but they're playing Green Bay. That's going to be a tough one. You guys are going to make that determination if you want to hold on to Detroit and maybe play a game or a team that not a lot of people are going to want to take, because Green Bay, obviously a strong opponent. And that's going to be a whole lot of game theory that you guys are going to have to work on yourself. And of course, just ask me questions down in the comments if you've got any questions or you want to talk it through. It can be cathartic to just kind of just get another opinion, even if I'm not giving you the team I would take. I like to sometimes just typing it out helps you think as well. So New England becomes the second excuse me, option here on larger pools, where we're looking at future value, taking that future value into account a whole lot more. So New England here, very little future value against Carolina. Carolina, of course, a big win last week. It's going to keep a lot of people off of this because Carolina had that really strong performance shutting down Atlanta. But the fact that so few people are going to be on this pick in a larger pool, we've got to take some risk. We've got to take some chances. And you're not going to win a large pool without taking some risk and leverage. By leverage here, what I mean is we don't have all that many people on New England. If we lost at the top both of these games, unlikely, obviously. And by the way, if you want to figure out, same way we were figuring out if we can win, if you want to figure out what the probability is of both of these teams losing, let's just say it's 8% chance that Buffalo loses, and we've got an 18% chance that Detroit loses. So we do 0.08 multiplied by 0.18. You've got a 1.5% chance that both of these teams lose. Very, very unlikely, obviously. But we do have a chance that maybe, an 18% chance that Detroit loses, and we would knock out at least a quarter of the most pools, right? So there's your leverage. You've got a team like, we didn't even talk about the Chargers, getting 15.5% right now. They're at the Giants. This is a team with a 27% chance to lose their game. Not a pick that I particularly like, but a lot of people are on it. If you do look, let's go to the Survivor grid and look at what the rest of the year here looks like for the Chargers, we can get an idea as to what people are thinking. But I just think that there's more. I just think there's stronger plays. And at 15%, if people are going to take the Chargers at 15%, I think we could do better. And I think this New England play, where they're not quite as big a favorite as the Chargers, this lack of percentage being taken on New England just makes them a stronger pick to me. Plus, there's less future value, I think, with the New England team than there is with the Chargers. I think there's not going to be great spots down the line, I don't think, here with the Chargers. Although home against Vegas, week 13, we'll see when we get there, possibly would be a pretty strong play. But again, we'll see. I just like getting that leverage. So when we find a situation, especially in large pools, where we can really get that good, strong leverage play, taking a team with the Colts were the perfect example of that last week. And if you watch, by the way, I mentioned this, I believe, last week, pay attention to the lines, the line movements each and every week. I do this on Wednesday morning. By the time Sunday rolls around, these lines may have moved a point, point and a half, 2 points. With an injury, even more so than that. Indianapolis last week, that line really started to move in Indianapolis's favor, and that became a stronger play. A lot of people won't look at that. Not many people took Indianapolis in pools. I really thought in large pools that was a strong play. Now, Indianapolis might wind up being one of the better teams in the league, and then we wound up taking a team that we didn't think had a lot of future value, but we just don't know, right? So, excuse me, this week with New England, if we can get away with a New England win, that eliminates a team that really doesn't have a lot of value to us here in the future. It's going to increase the equity in our pool. And if we get some chaos up at the top that we can avoid, we'll really pick up equity on the rest of the field. And our entries are going to be worth a whole lot more. So let's look at just quickly some of the other teams. We've got Houston here getting some, obviously with the 10% or so pick that we like. Denver just has a lot of really upcoming value. So that's why I don't necessarily like Denver. I don't like them in a small pool because I think either Buffalo or Detroit's going to be better. I think if we get to a more moderately sized pool, Houston becomes a better option with a lot less future value. And then when you look at a really large pool, I think New England becomes an even stronger play. So I just don't like Denver as much in all of these formats. They've got about a 75% chance to win, but I think we're going to have opportunities, better opportunities maybe to take Denver in the future. Again, it's not who I think is going to win. We're trying to look at this from a game theory standpoint. And as we get deeper, we're going to have a lot more strategies, hedging strategies, and things of that sort that are going to help you guys make some money. So I really appreciate you guys being with me here today, as I do always. And if you enjoyed this and you're new, or if you're not new, you've been here for a few weeks and you enjoyed this episode, and you've enjoyed some of the work I've done in the past, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, like the video, send it to a friend. Don't send it to a friend who's in your pool, of course, because that's going to give them an advantage that you don't want to give them. But send it to a friend who's in another pool, or maybe one of your teammates if you're partnering up with someone in your pool. That's going to be it for me this week. I'm Statsational for Scratching and Surviving. Good luck, and I hope to see you all again next week.